Hello everyone, welcome back to B-Roll Commentary. We've been gone for a while. In all honesty, about 2 weeks ago we did actually record an episode. We even had our camera system up and running, but something went weird and we wound up losing about 30 minutes of the audio. So we're back to doing podcasts until I get that sorted out. Anyways, we decided to try something a little bit different. We're going to talk role-playing games. We've kind of mentioned in the past that we do a lot of role-playing when we're not doing this. And we decided it was a good idea, and we're probably going to talk the systems we like, why we like them, a little bit about our experience with stuff, and maybe talk about how, you know, the whole live streaming of online role-playing game, or not online role-playing game, but role-playing has probably hurt and helped the thing as a whole. But anyways, we're back, and hopefully this one will turn out good. As always, I'm John.
Gary.
Joa.
So, who wants to kick us off, and how do we want to start this? You want to start with, you know what? I'll do this. Let's talk about, we talked about this, Joe, Critical Role, because I kind of agree with you. The more I've thought about it, it helps because, hey, it put it out there. It's like, look, it's not only for, you know, nerds living in their mom's basement, the stereotypical stuff. There are people out there that are professionals, there are celebrities. I mean, Vin Diesel's been on the show. Joe, I'm going to pronounce it, Manganiello, I believe, the guy that was cast to play Deathstroke in the DCU.
I always say Michelangelo.
Yeah, you always do. Terry Crews, the woman that plays Karen Page on Daredevil, or she did before the show got canceled. So it's made it really obvious that more
it's
people.
It's definitely a resurgence.
Yeah.
I mean, role playing has not been this popular ever.
Yeah.
But it's not been this mainstreamed
ever.
The last time it was close to this mainstream was in a negative connotation, which probably fueled. It fueled the player base that kept it alive until it got a chance to.
Yeah.
I played during that time, and I can honestly say that it did fuel the players.
Yeah.
That were very much keeping
kept
it
them
alive.
long term.
Yeah.
So it was a small player base, but it was a dedicated player base.
But it's also because of the way they've set it up, including the one that's made it most prolific, Critical Role, I'd say. It's kind of also hurt it, like you said, Joe, because I do agree with you. You know.
Well, that's jumping ahead. We've
perfect.
not had the front end on this conversation.
Yeah, you're right.
So, what we're referring to is there's no denying that Critical Role, which is a bunch of millennials, that's what happened, is the kids and the grandkids of the people that kept this going for years grew up playing this.
Trying to say I'm old?
No.
Yes, we are.
No, but there are people much older than you that have.
You can go ahead and say he's
Gary
old.
Gygax was much older than him.
Not by much.
But no, that grew up playing this because it was cheap, pretty much free because we already all own the books or some version of that system.
Yeah.
So, anytime that you're cheap or free, it tends to always have someone playing it somewhere.
Yeah.
So, but then as society grows and these children grow up and have successful jobs because they go to college and are more successful than their parents in general, although failed millennial here. The point is you end up with people like voice actors and agents and businessmen and women who all make six figures plus, yet they grew up playing role-playing games.
Yeah.
So then they use that influence
to make it more mainstream.
To make it more mainstream, which is what Critical Role did.
And again, kudos to them because I mean we've made it to where used to it was you play D&D, ha loser, and now it's you play D&D. Hey, did you know that Vin Diesel plays it, or are you watching the one that? And I cannot think of the actress's name, but it's the girl that plays Karen Page on Daredevil. It's the only thing or in the MC or Netflix series. She's running a series now. She's like DMing one.
Before Vin Diesel came out, she probably came out as role players.
Yeah.
Matthew, I want to say it's Lillard, who played Shaggy in the original Scooby-Doo movie.
Kevin Smith.
Kevin Smith. They all were talking about their role-playing experiences.
Exactly.
Well, and actually, while we still very much consider these two different things, although they borrowed each other's naming conventions for a long time, video games in the workforce side used role-playing as a way to disconnect from what they were doing day to day in front of a computer.
Yeah.
The last thing video game developers wanted to do
to relax is go home and play more video games.
Play more video games. So one of the things, I mean, they would and they do because they've got to keep up and they enjoy it, obviously. But one of the things they really enjoyed was the ability to turn around and go into pen and paper role playing, tabletop role playing.
It's one of those things. The last thing a writer that's writing a science fiction novel wants to do is go home and read science fiction.
Exactly. And so it led to these very famous people having these very backroom hobbies.
Yeah.
Like, you find out that this famous singer was a painter.
Yeah.
George Bush Jr. there is a painter.
Yeah.
Things like that. But then, because they're very public things that they're involved in, they started, and then the digital age came around.
And it's almost impossible to keep a secret now.
Yeah, so you can broadcast easily off of company Wi-Fi and not cost them anything, despite what network engineers will tell you. And
trade secret.
Spoilers. It just led to what we have now, which is basically Critical Role is the accumulation of all those factors.
Well, we're just talking about Critical Role, but there are others.
There are plenty of others.
But that's the one that everyone's immediately, if we start talking about an online Twitch broadcasted role-playing group, that's going to be the one that's predominantly shows up.
But you can pick any system, Google it in YouTube, go to YouTube, stick it in, whether that system be Vampire or that system be D&D, and you will get the famous 5 screens with 5 video feeds on a solid background of people that are role playing over, video
or a picture, or
sitting at tables and there's 2 cameras.
Yeah, and there's something like that.
So I mean, it's not just Critical Role, but the reason we keep talking Critical Role is what John started off with.
Yeah.
And something we've been debating for a few weeks.
And I have to agree, the more I've thought about it, you're kind of right. It's kind of hurt it because, you tried to get that other guy to join our group, and the first thing he asked you was, how many minis should I bring or whatever?
Yeah,
and
the very first thing was
Keep in mind, these are people with a lot of disposable incomes on these shows. Matt Mercer, every time there's a fight, has either taken the time to pre-construct a very good size battle map, which has terrain features and elevation and all this, or he's bought one from is it Dwarf Forge?
Dwarf Forge.
Basically pay them and they build you a map.
There's one of those,
and it has lights and smoke. Completely unnecessary. We've done Theater of the Mind where it's just you're in a clearing, you're fighting goblins. Is there a stump that I can jump off of to get behind the goblin? Sure.
Well, to give a history lesson on role playing in general, if you're one of these millennials who didn't start off role playing, you're jumping in, which by the way, 2 of us sitting here are. It's not a negative term we're using there.
Oh, forget you! I'm not a millennial. I was born in the '80s.
Yeah,
that is not a millennial.
No, actually,
it still is.
It still is.
I don't know what I am.
Anyway,
you're old.
You're Generation X.
I don't call myself a millennial. I'll never call myself.
Actually,
a millennial.
I think you are the end of Generation X.
I believe I am too.
Which
means I'm an X-Man.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that.
The Blob.
Sure.
Okay. Anyway, so role playing started off pen, paper, and a single book. One person sitting at a head of the table and giving a vocal description of what was happening and who they were interacting with. That person typically played every other character in the game besides the player characters, the PCs.
You do know,
however,
that the first role-playing game came from a miniature game.
I did.
Okay.
I did. But the maps were there was no distances measured out. There was none. They were more avatars.
It was more, here, let me draw a squiggly circle thing. There's the clearing of the forest you're in. And
that was usually on a scrap sheet of paper.
If you had that much.
Yeah, exactly. And that was on a scrap sheet of paper. So you'd hold it up showing the group a piece of paper and go, here's the clearing. You all are on this side pointing to the bottom right. The enemy's over here pointing to the top left. And that's generally it. Oh, and the enemy looks like, and maybe the GM had spent all of his paper money on
the monster manual.
The monster manual, and cracks it open, and here's a picture.
Yeah.
Or has cobbled together some
If you're
miniature.
Or if you're lucky, you had the pre-written module, and you could show them the picture in the pre-written module of what they may look like.
Yeah,
And a lot of
White
times,
Mountain
those had
and-
maps in the back that you could hand out
Yeah.
And
for certain fights.
Yeah.
and that's even jumping ahead some. So
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
quite a few.
So
some of the earliest, by the way, just to acknowledge it, some of your oldest, and I'm talking they're pretty well all dead or dying at this point, will tell you that they actually did not role play at the head of the table, like I said. They role played behind a visor or screen.
Yeah.
And
Which we still use, we just don't.
which imitates like Wizard of Oz, the man
Yeah.
behind the curtain. That was the idea, is to try and
it was
in
not,
Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain was his big deep voice, and
Yeah.
then he comes out around and it's this little 5'5"
Skinny guy.
skinny guy that looks like he should be selling candy in a candy store.
Yeah, the screen was not originally intended to keep track, like for you to keep all your info on, because you had, at best maybe 2 books you had to deal with, if that.
Well, it depended upon the
system.
system.
But the point.
But in the original, there was a system.
Yeah, the
Tunnels
point-
and Trolls or
the-
Dungeons and Dragons. That's
Dungeons
it.
and Dragons, the original Dungeons and Dragons, we seen a copy of it not too long ago in a store.
Yeah.
Actually, only had 3 books.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is, like, the screen, like we said, was to create this mental break between the person telling you the story and the players, as opposed to, oh, hey, here's where I have all of my stats for my monsters, here are all of my environmental conditions, my status effects, to get rid of all of that, and not a place to hang all that up. So that's the main thing we want to impress, is that you do not need 10,000 miniatures. I mean, let's be honest, guys. How many times have we looked up and gone, okay, you guys are being attacked by a pack of, hellhounds. But unfortunately, I don't have any hellhound minis, so you're being attacked by 2 wolves, and that's some kind of giant spider. And in a way, that kind of actually helped, because we're like, I'm going to attack the hellhound that looks kind of spidery.
What ended up happening is, fast forwarding many years, because this isn't a living history of role playing that we're trying to give. But fast forward many years, the plastics and the ability to do plastic molds led to a GM for relatively cheap in comparison to the old Reaper and Grenadier models. Grenadier being the company that sold those old war models that we were talking about. You could very cheaply have hundreds of models, to where literally you would have a plastic representation, as opposed to cardboard pop-ups that were very famous in some of the genres. For everything. Even spur of the moment, when your PCs go off the radar and you're like, you know what, this is a great place to put a black dragon to scare them back into what I want them to do. You could easily pull out a dragon model for $5 to $10, set it on the table, and boom.
If I remember correctly, when the D&D minis came out, there was like 6 to 10 in a box, and they were like 19.
And these are the this is even going back a decade.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about Reaper's Bones, which has completely changed the game even more.
Yeah.
We're not advocating not using miniatures if you like it.
No, I own thousands.
But we just want to point out that Critical Role paints this illusion, kind of like the guy that you talked to, Joe, of if you do D&D and you want to run, you need minis of all the stuff you're going to be fighting.
$500 worth of
You
stuff.
need to have, a detailed map so that they can tell when they're up against a building, whether it's a building they can climb to the roof of or it's too tall to climb. If there's smoke in there, it needs to have smoke effects on it. It doesn't need to have any of this. You can grab, maybe I think a play mat now that's just squares is maybe $20.
$20, and it's pretty
$20.
good size.
That some dry erase markers and a wet rag or paper towel or something, and congratulations, you have it done.
But it just I sat and tried to watch. I mean, obviously we've been role playing for years, and the idea that this has gotten mainstream is exciting. So I sat down naturally to watch Critical Role, and I personally, and I'm not speaking for the group, as some of us actually do really like it. I personally just have no interest in it, because it's not the type of role playing that I do. Like, that is not my role playing. My role playing is not to use a different voice for every character I play. My role playing,
it's too hard.
Yeah, it is. You're not a professional who's constantly being asked, okay, now we need you to do the voices for characters 1 through 12 before you leave from work today. Yeah, it's really hard to get more than maybe 2 or 3 voices out of it.
Because to me, I find it more distracting. Even and these are in Critical Role are voice actors. I find it distracting to watch them play and do their voices. And maybe it's because a lot of times they're trying to be funny. So you've got Joe Michelangelo playing like this little bitty halfling, and you've got this other dude who's playing a female barbarian, and so he's being funny. And trust me, we are very inappropriate and funny in our role-playing games.
Yeah.
That's a light.
But the voices I always find as distracting. In a game that I'm playing in, if a player or GM chooses to use one, I try and go with it and not. I go with what the player wants to do that I'm playing with. But when watching, I have very little
patience for
it. I really don't.
I kind of agree.
I'll agree with you guys, but I don't really have that much of a problem patience-wise for it. Probably because, if I'm being honest, most of the time when I had the night shift and I was in my squad car, that's what I would do, is I would turn on an episode, and I couldn't obviously watch it because I'm driving around in a police car, but I could listen to it, and I was like, it helped that the voices changed, so I was like, okay, we are now moved on to a different conversation with different people involved. So that helped, but I do agree with you. When I actually would be, off duty and I'd be watching it or something, trying to get caught up, it does get a bit distracting, which is another good point. You don't have to have voices. I mean, Joe, you practically do virtually no voice. Gary, you do the very sporadic ones. I do very sporadic ones. We've played with people that narrated in third person. They were like, all right, so instead of going, hey, I'm the barbarian Grognak, I'm going to go and attack this guy. He's going to go, so Grognak is going to run up, and he's going to take his axe and hit the goblin with it, So.
And there's been others who go, Grognak, attack!
Yeah.
And,
so there is no.
it just depends
that's
on
the other
the
thing
person.
Is, you don't have to be a professional voice actor to be a good GM.
No.
And but again, we're not knocking Critical Role for what they've done. We're just saying that.
Here's why I brought it up. The other part of the beginning of the conversation we had. My worry, while we are in definitely the Renaissance age of role playing, in every way, whether it be systems that are available, genres that are being explored, players that are available to play, dice to buy, minis to buy, paints to buy, tutorials for all of that. All of that is in its renaissance, every bit of it. But my worry is if Critical Role becomes the standard, I worry that the actual role playing will become an elite or off-putting thing, and it will become a spectator. And that is the exact opposite of what role playing was invented for.
It's not a spectator. It's not a spectator game.
It's just being like,
because I'm not comfortable doing voices. So if I was a new player watching Critical Role and then invited to join a game, I would feel hesitant because I'd be like, man, are they all going to be like on Critical Role? Are they going to expect me to have my painted miniature and my books and do voices? And none of that's required. Dice isn't even required. Show up to my game. Here's a character. If you don't even feel like one, you can use our dice. I always have thousands of dice. I'll give you a dice at the end of the game.
You really do have too many dice. This is
an ugly dice.
Joe at surprise.
Ugly dice.
Joe at surprise. This is your intervention.
Yeah, no, we're not going into my dice intervention.
All right. Anyways, we just wanted to talk about that for a minute.
So anyway, that's what we mean. I don't want to hate on Critical Role because
it really has brought
done some
mainstream.
good things for it and made it mainstream, but by the same time, it's done some things that we kind of feel like could be bad influences on some new players and things of this nature.
And I do agree with you, Joe. Very easily, people could see it and start becoming kind of elitist.
So if you have a new player joining your game, make it as easy on them as you possibly can, because you're going to want them to come back.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what it's about. It's about having people at the table.
Yeah, because you got to think some of our closest friends. Gary, I've known you for years and years, and we met through role playing.
Yeah, we did.
I could name players like Mike or Remy, and these are all players that you all won't know or ever meet. But I could sit here and name players all day long that I only know through role playing, and would never know them again. And almost none of them I role play with today, but I'm still friends with them today. And I just feel like role playing is a gateway for so many introverts that
because it's like the old saying, you don't have to be you, so it's a little easier to come out of your shell.
Yeah, like there's a friend, and I'm not even going to use his first name for fear of you ever hearing this. His no, it's kind of sad. He lost his brother very tragically, and it messed with his head a lot, a whole lot more than just depression. But man, he still role plays, and it doesn't take much to scare him off for months at a time. But when he's functioning, he shows up and role plays, and just manages to pull that persona together that he's chosen to play. And I just feel like if it did that for him, this is truly what it was. I mean, when you think back to the people we used to play with, Big Kenny, oh my goodness gracious, Mike, and all those people you wouldn't invite those people to save them.
You wouldn't invite them to your funeral.
No. But we role play together, and Pitbull is the perfect example. Pitbull is currently serving 3 life sentences in the federal penitentiary in Florida for murdering 3 people in a drug bust gone bad. But man, Pitbull could play the heck out of some Shadowrun, and
the redeeming quality. Are there any? Before we sentence, is there any
redeeming quality? He can play Shadowrun like nobody's business.
He was an excellent player in Shadowrun.
Oh, sweet! I need a new Street Samurai. I don't like Street Samurais. All right, I'm doing. We're gonna get double that.
Pitbull could be a Street Sammy any day of the week, man. And I tell you, it's just an interesting hobby. Most of the hobbies, one of the downsides is you tend to find people more like yourself because that's the way that hobby is.
Right.
Role playing appeals to so many different people for so many different reasons that you rarely find yourself. You find other weird people.
We've already talked about the fact that we have a lot of celebrities that have been mentioned. Mm-hmm.
And I do want to come back to Vin Diesel on that. I have a theory there.
We've already discussed your theory.
Conspiracy theory.
There was a guy on a show called Forged in Fire. They make blades, knives, swords, axes, whatever the case may be. This guy was an avid role player. He admitted it right there on TV, and still he was a knife maker. Could I make a knife? No. Joel might be able to. John might be able to. But that's the kind of thing that you run into, is somebody that is different than you are, but has a similar like and dislike.
One of my favorite groups of all time that I've played with, I was a college dropout, Summer of Joa for those Seinfeld fans, except it lasted 2.5 years. Yeah. And that's who I was. I had a surveyor for the city. I had a chemist for a multinational company that traveled to 3 or 4 countries 4 or 5 times a year. I had a grant writer, and the last 2 both had master's degrees. And this was our the gaming group. Yep. And it was one of the most entertaining groups we were in, and I was the closest to the stereotypical role player in that group.
Let me say this. It might have been one of the most entertaining groups he's ever been in, but when he would come to our house to role play, boy, he would fuss about that group.
Well, the GM
That's what I'm talking about.
The GM was a death GM. He's one that enjoyed
Killing the PCs.
So my group was one of the most elite when it comes to not dying. This would have been D&D 3rd and 3.5. So that it was just fun because we were all operating at a level of understanding the rule set that probably nobody outside of the writers and rules writers, I forget what they're called. Rob Schwab is a famous guy that actually does this for a lot of different role-playing groups where he writes the mechanics behind the story. We probably were on par with the actual mechanical writers for D&D 3.5. There was no way we weren't, because we were all quoting the rule books without opening the rule books.
Because you had to in order to survive.
To survive, absolutely. I mean, I remember one time we got in a 2-hour discussion about cubic feet versus a 1 cubic foot versus 1 foot cubed. And 2-hour conversation, argument. Basically because it come down to how much of a wall we were going to be able to turn to mud from stone. Because this was how we were surviving. We were going to die TPK, or survive based upon how many copies of this spell we had, how thick this wall was, and exactly how much it actually allowed us to
turn the
mud.
All right.
Let's go on to a different aspect here.
Now we're going to talk about the systems that we like, because D&D, it's the most prolific. It's been around not the longest, but it's definitely, I would argue, probably top dog in the genre.
That's still played today. It's probably the longest.
It's probably the longest it's still played today.
And like we said, most people that have exposure to it from online groups playing or whatever, that's what you're going to know. So we're going to talk about some of our favorite ones that are not D&D. We're not excluding D&D, because we probably are going to talk about it some tonight at some point. But we're going to go on other ones. And I'm going to start with my favorite, no big surprise to you two, the hero system. And I love it for one simple reason. It is completely generic and yet works on everything. They have a thing in there called a ranged killing attack. With the right modifiers on it, I can make that ranged killing attack into a machine gun, a laser rifle, superhero heat vision, a bow and arrow, a wizard's thunderbolt. You can literally build everything the same way with armor.
And
armor.
I want to say one question on one thing on that, talking about the energy blast.
Yeah.
The reason you will see a lot of games today tout that, but they're literally meaning you don't buy that at 2d6, 1d6, 1d8, or you don't buy it and it's a 1d12 spell, and that's just what it is. And you can call it a gun, you can call it a spell, you can call it lightning bolt. In the hero system, that same power can be all those things, and it actually worked differently for each character that uses it differently for those things.
The number of dice you have,
what is it actually
defenses that it works by,
Is it a physical object, or is it something I summon? Do I need my hands? Do I need my voice? Like, all of those things, and it sounds very complicated, but I'd like you to... I'm making that designation because so many games just boil it down to fluff.
Yeah.
When he said it could be all those things that wasn't fluff, mechanically we can make all of those things out of that one spell.
Yeah. And it's the same way with armor. You can put there's a thing for it called a focus, which means there's a physical object to it, and it's a Kevlar vest, it's body armor. You can just buy straight armor, and when you do that, you can frickin' just buy it straight and be like, oh, he's just naturally super tough, like, Superman. You can put, gestures, incantations. Oh, hey, it's a magic spell, whatever you want to do. And these things affect how many, because it's a point-based system, it's it's 1 for 1 points or 5 for 1 or however it is for that particular power, and that changes it. You can put a lot on there and have to pay like 10 points for 1 d6 of damage or 1 point of armor, or you can take it in the opposite direction and be doing 1 for 1 when it's normally like 5 for 1. Just depends on how much limit you want on it or off of it, and that's really nice. And because of that, it's every genre applies. We've used it to play superhero. We've played fantasy settings. We've played a Shadowrun variation. We've played a
Pulp.
Yep, we've played Pulp. We have never played it, but you can, or have we? Have we done a sci-fi one?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
we did.
okay. I forgot the sci-fi
We
one.
did.
You can do sci-fi with
and
it.
you can do Galactic Hero, which is a
Not Guardians of the Galaxy, but Legion of Superheroes.
Legion of Superheroes, where they're out there in space.
It's
they're
the
high-powered.
It's the 31st
century, and
all
they're
of that.
high-powered. Now, let me say something real quick about the hero system. There are a lot of additions.
6 of them now, I think.
I think you're right. I think there's 6. The one that John prefers is 5th. I also prefer 5th, and I've played Hero System since the first one. And 5th is probably the best. I don't know if Joe has ever played anything besides 5th, other than one time he's played 6th when we played Monster Hunter.
No, I've played everything from 3rd up. I will say 5th is my favorite. But if you don't play superheroes specifically, that 3rd edition of Champions was pretty nice.
Yeah.
There's like 3 books for it. That's all you need. They look like comic books on the front cover if you ever want to pick them up.
Yeah.
But I collect contained hero system
To tell you,
superhero.
to
RPGs.
tell you about a little something else about this system, it actually got its own comic book back in the 90s.
Which I have a few of.
Yeah, I know you do.
The Marksman,
Rose, Defender.
Yep, Defender. Which is actually still, is it the same Defender?
No, it's his grandson, I
Yeah,
think.
it's his grandson. So there's also a legacy element. They do reference back to previous heroes, and those heroes do have write-ups in the previous editions. So, but yeah, I mean, if you can think of a power, there's like a dozen different ways to do it. Like, one of my favorites is that people try and do Batman or a Batman-like character, and you can buy martial arts moves, throws, punches, kicks, takedowns, all this stuff, and they buy like 30, 40 different martial arts moves and say he knows all the fighting arts in the world. Or you can just buy extra strength that only applies to grabbing people, escaping from grabs, and disarming folks, and just buy extra dice of hand-to-hand damage labeled as punches, kicks, headbutts, elbow strikes, whatever, and just say he knows all the fighting arts in the world. It costs you way less points. It's another way to go, and if your GM is fine with it, you can do that. If he's a real stickler, he's like, no, you don't know the maneuvers unless it's on your paper, you can buy, basic strike, karate chop, judo throw.
And there are probably, I'm guessing here, 30 books for 5th edition.
Probably more.
There is actually for 5th edition, because I'm collecting them all. There's actually somewhere in the neighborhood of like 70 5th edition books.
Is there?
That's a lot.
But of core books that Hero put out themselves, there's probably
that's what I'm talking
45
about.
books.
Okay. And they cover genres. They cover
specifics, like
specifics, like if you want
to
kung
make
fu, they've got a martial arts book.
If you want to make a super speedster, there's a whole book about the different ways to make super speed.
They've got them for bricks. They got them for a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And they put out they supported 5th edition quite well.
There's spell compendiums for the fantasy settings.
The one thing with this, the reason why this is our favorite, but you've never heard of this, is because while this is a Renaissance and role playing, the one thing it is not is a diverse.
You say never heard of it, but they may have, because there was a video game,
Champions Online,
which
was the superhero MMO.
The superhero MMO, which is based off of the hero system.
I forgot that.
Champions.
Superhero setting.
Yeah, superhero setting.
The problem right now, when I mentioned there were systems were in the Renaissance, I was referring to new systems.
Yeah,
there are new systems.
The old systems sadly died out
Yeah.
before the Renaissance happened.
Yeah, they're not getting the revival.
Pinnacle, Hero,
Chaosium.
Chaosium, even Pathfinder is dying down right now.
It only got greenlit for a second edition, and I've not heard anything about that since.
The old school stuff besides D&D really died out.
Which I'm going to talk about some here in a little bit.
Savage World is probably, if I had to pick one of the most successful currently that can trace its roots back to the 90s and 80s. Savage World is it, because even Palladium's
Rifts is it's a
going
ghost.
if it's not gone already.
Savage World is how it's going.
I'll go ahead and tell you right now, it's a ghost. When I was stationed out in California, there was a gaming stop across my place that they had Rifts books going for like. I called you that one day and I was like, hey, don't ever let Paul know about this because he was a big Rifts player. But they had Rift books going for like $10 because nobody wanted them.
Yeah,
I was half tempted to just buy their whole set.
Rift's most recent book was a Savage World supplement.
Savage World supplement.
Yeah. So it in that instance, so we tout Hero System 5th edition over 6th because 5th was its renaissance and its most well supported, and we owned all of them. I'd say there's 70 books. I say I own probably 49 of them, I think was my last count.
Yeah.
Across the group.
Yeah, we're about evenly split on.
And
but we've got a lot right now. We're playing a fantasy game in Hero System, and I have to say,
it's much more freeing.
It is. It is. You can do a whole lot more with the system than you can even in 3.5 or 5th edition.
5th edition's left to ask you, where are my feats? Where are my prestige classes? And I'm playing 5th edition heroes like I don't. What do you want? I can do that.
Yeah. If I want to be a spell slinging knight, I can be a spell slinging knight.
That casts quicken spells.
Yeah,
I can do that.
Perfect example, Joe. We were dealing with that one campaign, and you were like, "We're dealing with a lot of big things. I need something to knock it around, and I'm a spellcaster. Hey, I have a really strong telekinesis, right? Cool." And you just started. I remember you started ragdolling that dragon when you actually managed to outmuscle it with your magic. So
Or we lost players and we needed, so I bought Summon Elemental, and with some sustainability on keep them. And
come with me, trusty rock minion.
It's just a really solid system. The reason it's not popular today is the work is on the GM with that system.
All the work is on the GM. Once the players make the characters, the players are done.
They've got some stuff out. There's a few books for there's a lot of supervillain books for the Champions thing. There's a few for the fantasy setting. But most of the time, you have to sit down and be like, okay, they're going up against this villain. He's, the Doctor Doom of this setting. I don't want to use the Doctor Doom knockoff they have in the book. I have to build this guy from scratch. And so that's a downside. Is that there's not a lot of pre-generated stuff simply because they wanted you to be able to do whatever you wanted without being tied down.
If you went out and bought everything, you were pretty well good, but that was very expensive.
Yeah,
it was.
And I'll tell you now, the books are not cheap again. I bought a couple of lots that were very large back when the books were going for less than $5 a piece. The books are averaging back up to $10 a piece again, and it's just not for a system that's getting ready to be, I think, 2 editions out if Hero moves to something.
Of course, there is one other thing that turns some people off, and that's the huge number of dice you can get to.
Yeah. You can get to
it's D6 base, and if you're playing a superhero game and you're, Hulk, Thor level strength, you can be rolling. I throw a punch. Okay, you hit the guy. You're rolling, 14,
15 D6
or more.
Depending on the higher end of the spectrum.
I've rolled up to 26 dice at one time.
Yeah. So that's the other thing is it can be really dice heavy,
but you would never see that in certain genres.
You would never.
You don't see it in pulp.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's for sure.
But that's something else that would turn people off sometimes. Is
John hit our group's most, at least, prolific.
I'm not gonna lie, it's my favorite too.
Gary, do you got something that's different than that?
I do have something that's different than that. This is my favorite role-playing system, and John's going to be surprised by this.
Probably not.
He's really not. He's thinking it's Call of Cthulhu, and story wise it would be, but system wise, it's an oldie. It's Powers and Perils.
Called it.
This is not my favorite to make characters in, like we discussed. We're going to talk about later. This is my favorite.
Oh god.
Period in the sentence. Favorite role playing system. The reason for that is because the players have a lot of freedom, but the GM has even more freedom because there is very little out there, period in the sentence, for Powers and Perils. So you're making everything up from the beginning.
Which again can be a turnoff for people, just like we said with Hero.
It can be, but it gives you, as the GM, plenty of power to steer the campaign the direction you want it to go. And I like the character creation system in it. It's not my favorite character creation system, but I do like the character creation system in it.
Because you can wind up getting really lucky or royally screwed.
It's very detailed.
Perfect example. Made a character, randomly wound up as an assassin.
Wasn't starting out like that.
Was
But
rolling
he ended up like that.
rolling up a sneaky character, or was hoping for a sneaky character, wound up randomly rolling it up, came out as like an assassin, and then something in his background I think made us come up with he was like trained to be a vampire hunter, but then wound up
Your family was a vampire hunter.
family
and
of
you
vampire
became
hunters, and I
assassin.
ran from it. Yeah, and then
Because you had to work with what you got.
and then
Yeah.
Joa, poor Joa. Poor Joa. What was it you had where you were like
He
you were
was
like
a mage.
yeah, you were a mage, but you were like an elven mage. You had like this. What was it? Was it you were like really like haughty, noble attitude,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
actually came from like.
Slavery.
I started to say, weren't you like the you were like the lowest poverty line? So you were like, how dare you offend my family name? And it's like, what is your family name?
Yeah, he came from poverty and he was trying to be a very haughty elf.
So sometimes it did lead to some interesting.
That's part of
Character
the thing I
ideas.
like about it, is that it leads you to some interesting character ideals.
Yeah, it was probably my favorite outside of Hero System. My favorite to play a mage in. I really enjoyed playing that mage.
You liked it because if you rolled a good number of successes, you could like open up, you could freeze a person in time for like centuries.
Built correctly, you were very open-ended magically.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
were.
You were terrifying.
Yeah,
course.
it was a lot of fun.
Of course, again, so is the assassin. If you sneak attack, it's like you're rolling weapon damage plus your dexterity plus your
Strength.
intelligence and your strength. You're adding like of your 6 stats. You were adding, or you're like what?
3 of them.
Yeah, you're adding like half your stats to it plus the weapon damage. So you were just straight up murdering things.
I gotta admit, when we made characters, it's fun. It's involved. But when we made characters, I was like, man, this is really showing its age. However, when we got to playing the game,
Oh yeah, it was fun.
it went in stride just fine.
I have to agree
And
with you.
I did not feel like it showed age at all.
I have to agree with you because when we were doing the thing with the when I was building my assassin, I was like, this is really tedious. Okay, yet I do not care the difference between being an assassin and being a thief, and then it became really important later on when I was like,
I'm gonna kill this guy.
and it's like, oh, he's a thief. He's a thieves guild member. Well, luckily I'm also have connections to the thieves guild because I think now more it's coming back to me. I remember he was.
Thief
We
and
wound up
assassin.
doing both because I qualified for both. But yeah, so.
So what do you got, Joe? As your favorite?
What is your system de préférence?
Well, I think in reality, my favorite system is probably going to be Hero System. But my favorite game to play is a different system. Originally, I just have played it in Hero System. But my favorite game, and this is a tough choice between 2 others, setting is what this would really apply to play, is Shadowrun.
Okay.
Cyberpunk's getting ready to get a big push due to The Witcher Project C Red or whatever it's called is going to release a Cyberpunk 2077 in the next couple of years.
I'm so excited. I want to be able to go full conversion and just pull off my enemy's arms.
Cyberpunk was the original one, I think.
I'm pretty sure you're right.
But it was only when Shadowrun came out and made it a true fantasy world, sci-fi fantasy world, that I felt like they hit their stride in the genre.
Because nothing beats I need to hurt stuff like a cyborg troll
Well,
with an assault cannon.
The thing is, the writing in Shadowrun was way better. Way better.
And the history was more in depth.
Well, that's what I'm
he's
talking about.
Okay, he's talking about the two. Okay, I'm sorry.
Let me say this: Cyberpunk had within the first couple of pages a statement: "Do not let your people get attached to their characters because they will die."
You're all going to die.
Shadowrun doesn't have that statement. Shadowrun expects you to play the character to live.
Yeah, in Shadowrun, I never felt like you're just playing till... Well, it depends on the GM, but Shadowrun was never designed to play until you're dead.
I think that's a shot at me because of one of the games I run. Anyway.
It's totally a shot at you.
Multiple games you ran.
Totally a shot at you.
But Shadowrun, the premise is we're in the future. The actual year numbers mattered when the books came out because they actually advanced the storyline, and each new supplement advanced the storyline a year or two, and then gave you what happened in that story in the world during that point. But telling you those numbers now would be useless because it's been 20, 30 years since these came out. So you'd have to advance them. But anyway, so the point is they're in the near future. A comet came at some point in the near future and morphed a percentage of the population into one of the fantasy races. Goblins, orcs, elves, dwarfs. That
Trolls.
combined with the fact major breakthroughs in technology, most predominantly in microelectronics and their integration into biology, in other words, cyborgs and cybernetics.
And companies taking over.
And then the world collapsing due to this change, companies stepping in because they had money and resources, they kind of just took over large portions of land. So your Walmarts, your Apples, your Microsofts, your defense contractors, more importantly.
Walmart.
So things like
Walmart.
Saab.
I think it needs to be said twice.
So your companies like...
Walmart, let's be honest, Walmart is like 90% of the way to being a megacorp now. The only thing they don't have is their own military.
Yes, but you had companies like Saab and Siemens and
Siemens.
other
Don't
large
judge
corps
me.
that actually had resources to outfit different operations. So they kind of picked up the pieces. It was set in North America. You had major corporations that owned large swaths, and only roughly a law force that ran throughout all of them.
Easiest way to summarize this: go to Netflix, watch the movie Bright, and just imagine that every once in a while a flying car shoots past and some of the people have cyborg limbs and you have Shadowrun. That's basically
if you
it.
watch Bright and advance the technology 100 years, that's what it is.
That's all Bright is just a modern day Shadowrun. That's all they did was just take out the cybernetics and downplay the fact that the president was a dragon, and that was it.
And I think...
But there's an old TV series. Believe it or not, William Shatner wrote a series of books, and they made it into a TV series called Tech War. It is very much cyber punk or Shadowrun, especially the part where they break into computers and things of this nature that a Decker does.
But yeah, like Bright is a perfect example of it. The elf that you see, the elf.
Joe had something to say.
Oh, sorry.
on that system, on that storyline, the primary thing about it was that the core setting was always the same. Although the story could change, you almost always played a group of adventurers that were going to do a set type of adventure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And usually screwing that up led to the campaign.
Yeah.
The GM only had to write the first couple, and then he could go off of what his players failed to do.
And
Or didn't fail.
And I'm not gonna lie, Shadowrun was the first time I had experience with a GM that looks up and goes, "Okay, you've done the job, you've gotten paid, you're leaving. Which way do you turn, left or right?" And I remember we got lucky and made the right choice, because as we turned and walked away, we heard pretty much all hell break loose as pretty much what passed for the FBI at that time stormed the mega corporation because they were tracking the GPS on the package that we had stolen. And he's like, literally, had you gone left, they would have apprehended you and ID'd you as the guys that frickin' broke in and stole the thing in the first place. But luckily, you went the right way.
And that GM was me, by the way.
Yes, I know. But
right.
just that was the first real experience with it.
All right. Let's talk about favorite character creation. I'm sure yours is going to be Hero System again.
It is, because if I can come up with it, I can do it. If I want to make a character that after he, in a fantasy setting, after he kills a monster, he harvests bits of it, and then when I get enough experience, I can breathe fire like the dragon we killed, or I can replace my eyes with basilisk eyes so that if I glare you down, you turn to stone. I can build that concept. If I want to build a wizard whose only thing is just 10 million variations of magic missile, I can do that. If I want to build, like I've done, if I want to build, he's basically Hercules. Nothing really special except he's going to live for an extremely long time and he's terrifyingly strong physically. I've got that. If I want to build Wolverine to Batman to Green Arrow to Wonder Woman to Black Canary, I can do that. If I want to build a Jedi,
We
I
get
got
it.
it. I'm just saying, that's why I like it. Is
I know.
I'm not limited. Anything else I have to look up and go, D&D. I want to look up and go, okay, he's a monster hunter. Well, what would facilitate that best? Well, a ranger would be able to do these things, but he really also needs to know is like chemistry and alchemy and stuff. So I want to throw a little bit of wizard in there, but I don't want the spells. Kind of have to either, homebrew a class or hodgepodge it together and just willfully leave stuff behind. So you gotta pick your best option in other systems. But in this one, you can just go, here's what I want to do. Cool, I got the points. Let's do this thing.
Okay. Joe. System. Favorite character creation. System.
Shadowrun's a close second. Shadowrun, I can still today build the exact same character that I love to play in Shadowrun. Drop of a hat, and I haven't touched the system in a decade.
But you said it was a close second. What's
Close
your favorite?
second.
Here's
My favorite.
no,
No.
really.
My favorite will always be, and has always been, and is a close second itself to being my favorite RPG of all time, is Street Fighter.
Oh
Really?
yes, Street Fighter, which we should talk about a little bit.
Hold
It,
on. I haven't got it.
Street Fighter is based on the White Wolf system, which you are possibly familiar with if you're newer to role playing. And it was a weird, I'm sure somebody's brother knew somebody and thought we could get this licensing. I know who could give it to us. And someone looked up and said, sure, I got a way combat could work better than that. And it did. It really did. The thing is, with Street Fighter, is one of the few that it's best not to use a map, even though it comes with one and comes with minis, paper minis. And by not using a map, you really hamper a few, like just 2 or 3 maneuvers in the book.
Yeah.
But if you will throw the map out and not be restricted by the map and let a GM just kind of play it off and worry with are they screwing the player or not about how far people are from each other, and let that all fall to the GM, and the GM will learn in time. That game is one of the most entertaining and fun games I've ever played. Every time I've played it.
I agree with you. It's
And
fun to play.
I like to run it.
I know you like to run it, but is this your favorite for character creation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I kind of liked it too. You can make cyborgs, martial artists, mutants.
The style of martial arts you played was the primary choice in the game, and then the style allowed you to only choose certain maneuvers. It was great.
With
Okay,
rare,
I'm gonna say something.
rare exception.
I'm going to say mine, and you can't change.
No, that's
Yes,
that's
you
it.
can.
That's for sure it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Dark Conspiracy.
It was a lot of fun. It's
Character
in the top
creation.
5.
Character creation in Dark Conspiracy is fantastic.
Don't get me wrong, Joe.
Roll for a job every 5 years, and that's the job you did for the last 5 years. And it gave you a wide variety of skills, a wide variety of this and that.
Unless you got screwed over and kept winding up as homeless.
You could pick it if you
could
didn't
pick
like what you rolled.
No, I forgot that part. I just remember, I remember the first time that I tried to make a character in that, I rolled, for 10 years, my guy was homeless. I was like, I don't want to be homeless for 10 years. That's horrible.
But it also gave you your age.
Gave you
that is
age,
also true.
Gave you skills, gave
Yep.
you how much money you had, gave you all kinds of things. And if you've never played Dark Conspiracy, it is exactly that, a conspiracy. You have no idea what the GM's got going on, whether it's aliens, whether it's monsters, whether it's an agency that's behind it all.
And you wind up with
It's
some
like-
weird, freaky events.
Mad Max meets Men in Black and Supernatural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit more to the world than Mad Max says there is. Definitely not the full world that exists in the other two.
No.
But it's kind of that. You are, by the way, never the Men in Black.
Nope.
And
Never. Matter of fact, Men in Black are one of the bad guys.
yeah, they are.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
You are one of the schmucks that it's like, I need you to come with me for questioning, and then you show up 3 weeks later wandering the desert in a stupor.
Yeah, lobotomized.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what happened?
You
Oh, someone
are,
gave me a
you
nice
are
little-
Sam and Dean from Supernatural is exactly what you are.
Except you don't have.
They're in a far harsher world.
It's hard
Yeah.
to say, you don't have God and the angels looking out for you.
Yeah, you
so-
don't have all of that.
So go back to the early episodes where it was like, did you guys go through the thing with the bugs? Yes, yes,
you,
we did.
You ran from demons.
Yeah.
This was not a. This was not a. How do we get rid of the demon thing? This was a. Oh, there's a demon. Well, bye. Like perfect example. One time, Joe went to a back alley bar because it was in Prohibition was when we were playing. Went to a back alley bar, got some bootleg whiskey, and it turned out it had something growing in it. Because didn't you cough up? I think it was described as a horrible nightmare.
No, that was Call of Cthulhu, and that was Ryan.
That's
that
right.
did that.
Yeah, he coughed up like a horrible nightmare octopus.
That is my all-time favorite game. Period. In their sentence for storytelling purposes.
I like Dark Conspiracy more for its setting than for its character creation, although it is in my top 5 character creation.
And I do have to admit, I like some of the things they did, like where they made Bigfoot psychic to explain why people can't ever get a clear picture of it or anything.
Of stuff people are familiar with today, Monster Hunter International is probably the closest representation to it, although the world is still very much together.
Yeah.
Think Judge Dredd, as far as there are major cities in the world that are together,
Yeah.
But
and the economy of the world does work, but
not
there
as
are
well as it should.
large wastelands that have just been given up to the supernatural.
Yep. It's like, oh, there's aliens. Well, we're just gonna retreat a little bit, just slide back a bit. Priest.
Priest is a good one.
Yeah, Priest. Because
Priest is a good one.
everything still worked between the cities because obviously they had trains that were running and everything. But
And
The
vampires
cities-
were definitely as deadly in Dark Conspiracy as they were in Priest.
Yes.
yeah, it was not. Yeah, it was not. We can get together and kill a vampire. It was we can get together and determine who's going to be the bait while everyone else escapes.
the best representation of how horrible it was to run across a vampire in Dark Conspiracy is John Carpenter's. Is it Vampire?
Yeah,
the first one.
The first one.
The first one.
Yeah, don't watch the second one.
That is absolutely a representation of, oh crap.
Yeah, where he opens the hotel room door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you go and you manage to kill some baby vampires.
Yeah.
Maybe, by the way, maybe
using
in
like a 10, 12 man team
Yeah.
to manage to kill like what was it? At the start of the movie, it's like 8.
But heaven help you if you, after that's over,
You found one that was
have angered
competent.
the master vampire.
He didn't even have to be the master one. He had some of the
Just
he had
not
some
just
of
the master of that
Yeah, he had
nest.
Some, he had some mid-range ones with him that were pretty murdery.
Yeah, not mastering any form of like hierarchy.
Yeah.
Just the one that made all those.
Yeah.
Just that one.
But anyway,
The one that's been a vampire for more than a week.
that is my favorite
Yeah.
character creation system.
I'll give you that's probably a solid 4. Hero being 3.
Well, I want to do honorable mentions since we got on the John Carpenter's vampire thing kick, and I want to talk about World of Darkness real quick. We're past the hour mark, so I think unless anyone has any more honorable mentions, we'll end it after this.
We'll probably all have honorable mentions.
Yeah, I've got
So let's just
So
limit
go
it to
ahead.
one honorable mention apiece, huh?
So go ahead.
I like the World of Darkness in the Vampire the Masquerade one. I don't like the one that came after it, which I think is Requiem
I believe
or
so.
whatever. I don't like the stuff that came after. I liked it in this edition, and I actually think that what few games I've seen of people playing it online have gone back to this, or White Wolf has re-released a new version of this. Because every time I
think
search
they
for
released a 20th anniversary version.
There is a new edition out. I haven't really talked to anyone that has played it and for sure can tell me it's the old storyline. Because really it's just story. System-wise, I'm not married to the system as being perfect.
yeah, but it's very simplistic too. Just being able to go.
But the story's the thing they screwed up in Requiem, and I don't know if they undid in the newest
Yeah,
edition.
I don't know if they did either.
But yeah, like that was the thing was, it's the final days of what might be the vampire apocalypse / the world apocalypse, depending on how you read things. Vampires are becoming so diluted over the generations that the people they're turning are essentially just marginally stronger humans
Yeah.
that can't take the sunlight. Freaking, Kane is coming back. The old ones are coming back. Like we're doing in my game right now. You guys are dealing with basically what equates to a 4th generation vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Highlander, where the gathering is happening, but nobody knows what the gathering is.
That's a really good example.
And nothing spooky is happening.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing's really happening. Just everybody talks about is the gathering's coming.
Yeah, it's a
Or
long
happening.
drawn period.
I would hate that.
But yeah, it is. I never thought about that, but it is very much like the Highlander movies. Not necessarily the second one or the third one or the last one, but like the first one, maybe Endgame.
The whole world though just worked. Even though nobody played Mummy or Changeling or Mage or Werewolf and Vampire all. They played one.
Yeah.
That edition of
Now,
White
I
Wolf.
did run one game in which everything was open to everybody.
Well, I mean, in generally it always was though. Like
Right.
You just had to figure out a way to make it to where
it was
werewolf,
to the GM.
Yeah, he just had the work of how do I prevent the
Werewolf
mummy
from killing them.
the mummy from trying
Well,
to
running them all together.
Right.
But I just mean like if you ran a vampire game, the GM had the ability to take anything from the others, and just a nugget from it was enough to make it worth of an adventure.
Yeah.
So I know people that love White Wolf, the edition we're talking about, and which I think is 1st and 2nd edition.
I don't remember.
And they never played Vampire, which is what I almost completely played.
Yeah.
They played Mage, or they played Werewolf, and they would never consider playing either Vampire or Mage. And then I've met people that played Changeling. They played Changeling
and
and nothing else. They didn't care for anything else. Now vampires showed up in their games and different things happened. The weird odd person that played Mummy, or Wraith. But then the whole world got changed when Hunter came out.
Yeah. Everybody wanted to play the Hunter.
Everybody went into Hunter, which was a very deadly game and as in the PC's killing things.
Yeah,
As
because
in the PC's dying.
You are human fighting things that move faster than
Yeah.
bullets, and in their presence, you go in. There's a very good chance you go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah, so it was just it was D&D's primary rival for years and years and years. And when they went to a new edition and changed the story, which was such an odd and still is to this day an odd thing, they pretty much did the second coming of Christ equivalent to the Bible and rebooted everything.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: they didn't just change the story; they changed everything. You went from having Toreador and Ventrue to having
no, they reset it
Deva.
all. That's what I mean.
Yeah, it was like Deva, and it's like you're from the bloodline that progenerated this, and I'm like pretty sure if you follow the lore, it was I made this guy a vampire, and I made this one a vampire, and then they made the Ventrue and the Toreador. There was no intermediary between point A and point B.
So going back to correlate to a movie, if you wanted to watch a movie that gave you the feel of this, it very obviously, I think there was even lawsuits considered over this. Underworld is the vampire version of
the funny part
White
about
Wolf.
that is Underworld was originally written for a World of Darkness movie,
and they didn't want to do
and
it.
they didn't want to do it, so he got someone else to do it, and that's why they lost the lawsuit when they sued because of Underworld, is because they were offered the option first to do it,
and it is
decided not
very
to.
obvious once you've played a few games of Vampire and get a feel for how the different clans are actually like played and portrayed and everything. You go back and you watch the Underworld movies, and it's blatantly obvious. Like when I watch them now, I very easily am sitting there going, "He's a Ventrue. She's technically kind of a Ventrue. Okay, that guy that they sent to the castle in the second movie, clearly meant to be Nosferatu. They just made him less ugly.
This group of people is definitely Giovanni.
Yeah, there's no way that this chick is not a Toreador.
Yeah.
And the funny part about this is, again, leave it to me to know this, there was a television series back in the 90s called Kindred the Embrace, and it was based off of World of Darkness.
Which we also have on DVD somewhere.
I know.
Not worth getting on DVD. Though.
We own it because someone left it at our
I
house.
tactically acquired it. For anyone who's been in the military, you know exactly what that terminology means. I stole it.
The thing about it is, and I got sidetracked here because of what John said. There is also a documentary that states about how World of Darkness changed pop culture because of how popular it became. They actually made a documentary about it.
Oh, I definitely think you see it in like the Blade trilogy when it came out.
Yeah.
They definitely, I mean, Blade was a well established before World of Darkness came out.
He's old.
But the Blade that was portrayed on screen, and more importantly, forget Blade. Blade is Blade as he was in the comics. But the vampires that were portrayed on screen were not the vampires in the comics.
No.
They were most definitely vampires ripped straight out of the pages of World of Darkness.
The vampire in the comics were
Dracula.
They were. It was literally Dracula.
Blade 3, you start seeing a vampire Dracula, funny enough, that is closer to what was in the comics.
Yeah.
Horrifying monster. Anyways, do your
My
honorable
honorable
mentions and let's
mention.
wrap this.
I got 2, even though John said leave it to 1, I got 2. 3.5,
Okay, so we can skip over that technically.
or you can skip over that if you wish.
Well, I mean, skip
And
over it
Dungeon
and then we don't
Crawl
need to
Classics.
I mean, skip over 3.5 is in we don't need to discuss it. Everyone who's listening to this presumably at least has a vague idea of what D&D is.
And Dungeon Crawl Classics.
That one you can talk about.
That is basically a throwback to 1st and 2nd edition.
Where you are afraid of a pack of 4 goblins no matter how many people are in your party. I'm not gonna
And
lie.
that's one of the reasons I like it. It's because you can't just waltz through everything like you did in some editions of D&D.
Who was it in the game we played that kept trying to throw their dagger at something in the dark and kept just banging off of like everything in the warehouse we were fighting?
It was either you or Joe, because you two are the only ones that's played Dungeon Crawl Classics. And I can't remember.
I just remember that though. Like it was so bad. Like
That was 2nd edition.
yeah,
And that was... What was her name? You should come with Chris to the games.
Oh, I'm not going to repeat what her name was.
Yes,
because I will say unkind things.
That was one of the girlfriends of a player that we played with for a long
Anyway, she was the one that was throwing the dagger and pinging it off of everything in the warehouse because the warehouse was pitch black, and that was in second edition.
Second edition.
This is also second edition where someone who shall remain nameless.
We are talking about DCC. We're not talking about second edition.
You're right. We are talking about DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics. When we picked it up, we picked up the small version of it first. And we were in the car coming home. And we were talking about it. And Joe and I both quickly realized this was the old edition to D&D. Did we not?
Yeah, this was the first games we played when playing.
And
styled as, I should say.
And we actually turned around, went back to the game store, and picked up the hardback edition of it that same day.
Yeah, because I knew right then that I wanted to play that game because while I said before this podcast we were not going to discuss this, I will say the first game that Gary played ever was Power and Perils, and the first game I played ever was D&D Redbox. So when we read DCC, it really harkened back to what
the stuff that Joe played.
We started out with, and it was just amazing. It really,
and it's hardcore D&D. It really is. And I want to get back to it at some point in time and play it in the near future, but that's for another podcast. Joe, your honorable mentions, if you have any.
You only get one. Make it good.
I'm not going to talk about all of them, but there's of the good quality role-playing games that are out there that if somebody said, hey, I'm going to run a game of this, my answer would not be based on the fact of what he just said. Yeah. And in those games, I really enjoy I'm trying to think of stuff that's not the first four that popped in my mind are stuff nobody would ever say. The Marvel and DC role-playing games, all of them.
Okay.
Every edition of them, and if you don't know anything about them, that's a broad statement because almost every edition was different.
Which I'm going to go ahead and say it. If anybody from Marvel ever somehow listens to this, which I don't see it happening, but if they do, for the love of God, you guys are missing an opportunity. As hot as Marvel is right now, you need to go back and snatch up some of the people that have left Wizards of the Coast or the World or White Wolf or somewhere and be like, hey, build us a system. And
they're both that way, and there's nothing in the works either.
They need to so bad.
Constantly look it up and try and stay on top of who has the licensing. And there's just nothing in the works for it. I assume it's because the license fee is so high, particularly once Disney took over Marvel. But the worst editions of all of them are the most recent editions you will find.
I agree.
DC's based off of Mutants and Mastermind, which is not a bad system.
It's D20 based. It's not the best.
But if I was going to play a DC game, it would not be the first one I went for.
No.
And the idea being you have pre-generated known characters, and then ideally you play your own character and then interact with these pre-generated Batmans and Supermans.
Yeah, I think it was second edition DC for me that was the best.
For me, it's third, and second and third are very close to each other.
I don't remember exactly which edition it was.
The second and third editions of DC are very close to each other. The first and what amounts to second edition of Marvel are very close to each other. And then the rest they're all different. DC Mayfair third edition was what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's the one with the holographic cover of Doomsday, and it's the best system out there.
And it was the most supported of the DC games.
Yeah.
Because they put out a lot of supplemental books to it. So I remember that because I actually had the equipment book for Mayfair edition.
we
Third
still
edition.
have
We
one of
probably do have it somewhere on the shelf.
There's something. There's a DC game book on the shelf with all the older stuff. So yeah, I know we do somewhere.
I own it all.
Just shame.
That particularly that edition of DC, I spent 20 years trying to not pay $100 for it.
You paid $100.
No, I got given it actually at the end of
really?
it. Somebody online gave me a copy. The edition after that's a box set with a black cover. That had they both do, don't they? It's got Superman on the cover.
Yeah.
And it's
Okay.
DC's going to have Superman on the cover.
The easiest way to clarify, is it short-haired Superman or is it mullet Superman?
I don't remember.
That clarifies.
It's DC Universe, actually. It's the box set DC Universe, is what it's called. The actual system's called DC Universe. It comes with its own dice. You can use D6 if you need more because there's like one size.
You had a wild die.
One side's this and one side's that, and it will work if you wrote it down. But that one had a lot of stuff put out for it that was really nice. On the Marvel side, that is the most interesting. Marvel's first and second edition is a game that the diehard people of it from the late 70s and early 80s are still playing that game today. There are multiple people I have ran into that are playing the same campaign they started back in the 80s. And they're still playing it today.
You can still find a few people online because Nerdarchy, now that I think about it, Nerdarchy I think did one.
Oh, yeah. That's some old school gamers there. They've played a real long time and can give a lot of it's examples of stuff like this. The next edition that's interesting for Marvel is an expensive Marvel Saga, where they replaced dice with a deck of cards, and your powers were basically what cards you could draw, and then the randomization was you had to play with what you had.
Yeah.
That game is having
I prefer the dice one.
A renaissance.
I think everybody prefers the dice one.
Well, Marvel doubled down on no dice with the very next edition, where basically it was no dice. You got action points, for lack of a better term, that you could spend every round to do your powers, and you bought all your powers at certain levels. So if you expended all your energy and action points early on, you would be limited on your recovery of what you could do later. Now, it used this gimmick of stones, and you would use stones that you would move around, a different color for health, a different color for action points, a different color for strength, and it did this little weird thing trying to sell this as a really just a gimmick, but it actually plays really well, and they put enough characters into the system that you had like over 150 characters you could put in the world. But those are some of my favorites. I will tell you that there is not fantasy beats it, but next to fantasy, superhero is the most prolific genre out there.
Yep.
And you will find 100 different systems. I
would
probably own 30.
And you wouldn't think that it would be.
But for whatever reason, it really is a genre that touches a lot of people. It just is one that's hard to roleplay in, so it's more people.
It's hard to GM.
Well, the GM's what I meant.
You kind of have to basically either keep coming up with plot hooks yourself to work with, or you kind of have to steal plot lines from comics and hope your players haven't read them.
Yeah.
Well, but there, in my opinion, there's so many plot lines out there that you can steal and mesh. And,
but anyway.
But yeah, no, I enjoy that. This is one of my favorite segments we've probably ever done. I would like to do a lot more of role-playing podcasts.
We can.
Joel wants to do a role-playing podcast.
I want to go back and do what you're about to say.
I like to do the old movies.
We need to
some
pick
more
a
old
new year.
movies. In fact, that's probably going to be our next one. We just got to pick a year.
I'd like to pick 84. We did John's birth year. I'd like to go back and do my birth year of 84.
84?
84.
There you have it, folks. Probably the next podcast we do will be movies of 1984.
And if we go back to your birth year, well, it's going to be Stone Tablets.
Hey, we're not doing that. Silent,
that's good.
silent movies.
That's good because it's going to be okay. So
I'm
Gary
not that
picked-
old.
Yes, you are.
I'm only 54.
You know, I heard a rumor about Charlie Chaplin.
Oh,
Where'd you hear
can you confirm?
I heard a rumor that Charlie Chaplin was gifted in an area, and that one of his favorite party chicks.
Joe, I remind you, I am not age restricting this.
One of his favorite party tricks was to do voice impressions.
Okay.
Google it and you can find out what impressions he did.
All right. Anyways,
Anyway,
that concludes our role-playing podcast. We hopefully are going to do more in the future. We're glad that we're back, and hopefully the audio doesn't get horribly janky on this one and cause us to miss another couple of weeks and lose a whole podcast. But we hope that you subscribe if you want to see more of our stuff, like the video so that we know to keep doing more of them. Look out for probably maybe in about 2 or 3 weeks, probably. The next one's going to be Hindsight Cinema for 1984. And other than that...
At the earliest, I've got some role playing I want to do.
And other than that, we'll see you next time on B-Roll Commentary.